It is my great pleasure to introduce this session, which really is a very special session. Do we have Professor Sachs online? Yes. Hi, Jeff. This is Adil Najm from Boston University. I hope you can hear me. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. Everyone, we are delighted to have a special post-lunch speaker, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, who's going to talk about the 50 years of IIASA, maybe even what lies ahead. Jeff, I'm not going to even try to introduce. We all know you. Jeff is a big thinker. Jeff Sachs is a friend of IIASA. Jeff Sachs has enabled generations of people to think big, to think bold, to think about how ideas are connected, to push on the boundaries of what we want to achieve, and to push hard on thinking about how to achieve it. And for all of those reasons, we are delighted to have him join us, although electronically, virtually, and make us think even harder than we have been doing so all day. All yours, Jeff Sachs.
Adil, thank you very much. And friends in the room at BU, I wish I could be with you in person, but I'm absolutely delighted to be with you by video, and friends around the world that I know are joining this birthday celebration of IIASA. Let me say how happy I am to be celebrating and how good it is for all of us together to be celebrating IIASA. IIASA is a remarkable institution. It is a unique institution, both in its heritage and in its contributions. And we need IIASA and institutions like IIASA even more in the coming 50 years. So IIASA, of course, was born in the Cold War as a place where scientists could meet from East and West. Luxembourg, Austria was a great setting and in a magnificent venue and an inspiring venue filled with history and beauty and Baroque architecture. It's a great place to work. And I think IIASA has demonstrated far beyond what might have been expected the fruitfulness of this idea. Now, why is the idea so good? Well, the basic point was there are great scientists everywhere. And in a world in which there was a geopolitical Iron Curtain, that was no reason for a scientific Iron Curtain. Science is a global enterprise. This has been recognized throughout history. Scientific advance depends on the global exchange of ideas. We've been doing that for thousands of years, and the Cold War was absolutely not a reason to hinder the flow of knowledge. And of course, the Soviet Union had great scientists, and Central and Eastern Europe behind the Iron Curtain under Soviet domination had many great scientists, and this was the opportunity to tap the great science on both sides of a geopolitical divide. It was also, I think, a boon to those scientists that were in a very repressive environment to give some breathing space for their genius, their wisdom, for their potential contributions. It turned out that IIASA, because of its non-standard pedigree, actually developed a new kind of science. I would say IIASA has been a pioneer and a leader in the science of sustainable development, which is the science I like, which is an integrated study of physical processes, engineered systems, and public policy. And that's not an easy or normal kind of science, but it is the kind of science that IIASA championed. And it's interesting to think about how IIASA got there. My view is a little bit in a roundabout way. When you brought scientists from the United States and Western Europe together with scientists from the Soviet system, you couldn't do a normal macroeconomic model, which was the kind of modeling that scientists or policy types in the West were doing. And you wouldn't want to do a central planning modeling that brought the two sides together. So they thought about what could we work on and how could we work in a way that was not dependent specifically on political institutions per se. And what came out of that was a tremendous attention to the biophysical planet. And IIASA became early on a champion of geographic information system data and management, to very early studies of agricultural suitability in different parts of the world, preparing new maps of the world's ecological, biophysical, oceanographic, climatological flows. And this fit rather well, I would say, with an institution that was bridging East and West at the time. It also fit with, I think, the skill sets of the scientists that were joined together. Soviet science made huge, huge pioneering contributions in geography, and maybe the planning system required that kind of geographical planning based on underlying agricultural and geological and climatological parameters. Now, it happened that the birth date of IIASA was exactly the birth date of global diplomacy on what we now call the Anthropocene. It's exactly the same 50 years ago that three great events took place. The first was the event of the first ever global summit on the human environment, the Stockholm Summit in 1972. The second great event was the publication of Limits to Growth, which was remarkable at the time, an early computer simulation model that aimed to link biophysical systems and economic systems in a single model. Pretty basic if you look back now, but not only eye-opening, but really pioneering. Now, the third great event 50 years ago, you can't know really, because it's only a great event for me. I entered university, and that was my freshman year at Harvard. And one of the first books that I was assigned in introductory economics was Limits to Growth. So it got me thinking. Incidentally, my professor in introductory economics told us, don't worry about it. It's not real. It's a model made by engineers, not by economists. It doesn't understand market dynamics. And anyway, it was made by MIT professors, not by Harvard professors. This is what I was told 50 years ago. Don't think about it. Well, it turns out I've spent my whole professional life thinking about it, and much of that time working on it. But IIASA was born just as this notion of the physical planet and the impacts of the economy on the physical planet were coming to the forefront for the first time in global scale systems thinking. And IIASA became the champion of this kind of global scale systems analysis, as the name tells us. And that kind of systems thinking, linking the biophysical systems to the economic systems, I would say has been the hallmark of IIASA from the start. And you think about the contributions that IIASA has made in so many areas in this mode of analysis, global biodiversity, the agriculture system, wonderful work of Wolfgang Lutz and his colleagues on global demography, on migration, tremendous work by Naki and his colleagues on the energy modeling, tremendous work in recent years in Globium and other models on the ecological impacts of Earth systems, of economic systems, I should say, and where and how to prioritize the protection of biodiversity. There are very few institutions on the planet that have been so productive exactly in creating this new kind of science of sustainable development. And I think it's right to say, other than the small team at MIT, none that pioneered this area more than IIASA. So this is the first huge contribution that I would point to. It wasn't only a good idea to enable scientists to breathe and scientists to think, but also it led to a new kind of science that turned out to be incredibly propitious for the challenges of sustainability that we face today. The second phenomenal and unique contribution of IIASA is in science diplomacy. And by that, I mean not only producing great science, but producing science that brings together a highly diverse group of countries that do not have so many opportunities for meeting and working together. Well, I think we feel right now with the Ukraine war, these facts absolutely even more dramatically. And when the war broke out, the cancel culture in the West said, break all ties with Russian colleagues, an idea that I completely deplore. I think it's exactly the wrong approach. In fact, I would say it's the opposite of what we need. And Albert and I and other colleagues discussed this immediately, and we've been saying the opposite, that science diplomacy is a vital part of diplomacy, period. And diplomacy, I believe, is an indispensable instrument for keeping us from blowing each other up. So I don't know about you, but I'm taking every opportunity I can to connect with Russian colleagues. I appear in Russian media, and people tell me, don't you dare do that. You'll be misused and abused. I find this just wrong. I don't trust our governments. I'm sorry to say governments are on the board, I know, of IIASA, but I don't trust our governments to get this right. I would like to see more diplomacy, less militarism, if I may say, even in how we respond to a brutally military attack by Russia on Ukraine, because I think diplomacy is the solution to this. And I actually believe, though this is a digression, that diplomacy was the way to avoid this in the first place. That's a long story, but I have been an opponent of NATO enlargement into the Black Sea region, and especially NATO enlargement to Ukraine and Georgia from the time that it was proposed in 2008, because I think it's provocative, and I don't like us to be provocative. I like us to be sensible. I like us to be around the table. I like us to be colleagues. I don't like us to be pushing into the other's face to the maximum extent, as if the world is a game of chicken, because it must not be, especially not in a nuclear weapons age. So this is the second point of IIASA that I think is absolutely crucial. IIASA's board of member governments that have a place to meet where we can have science, the quest for truth, and analytics in the forefront, not name calling, not public recrimination, not public posturing, not a world of tweeting, but actually, and sorry to all you Twitter users, but I don't believe in it. I believe that we should actually sit down and talk with each other and negotiate with each other. And I think the third part of that, not high level science diplomacy, is just the informal connections that IIASA makes. IIASA is a family. I feel part of that family for a long time. I'd love to visit IIASA. I'd love to work with colleagues at IIASA. I love the family connections that are global. And that's why I feel when a crisis comes, I want to talk to my Russian friends, not to avoid them. I want to reach out right now, as I do daily, to my Chinese colleagues, many of my students who are now in positions of responsibility in China, because I believe in an interconnected world. And I believe absolutely, also backed up by good psychological research, that when we talk with each other, when we deal with each other as human beings, we actually can put aside our strategic dilemmas, our fears, our misunderstandings, and actually find a way to fruitful, positive-sum cooperation together. Well, just a word about IIASA and the future. IIASA is a place of great strength, great contributions, a vital global network, and what has been an uncanny capacity to take on the important issues, I'd say generally 10 or 15 years ahead of the general global recognition of how important these issues are. We are in the age of the Anthropocene. We need this kind of systems thinking. The systems thinking really does extend beyond any single political system. We don't need the categorization of us versus them, or democracy versus autocracy, or many of the other slogans, all of which I think are simplistic and misguided right now. We need a global effort because we are on an interconnected planet and share a common fate in the ability to head off the worst of climate change, to avoid the disasters of ecosystem collapse, to protect the oceans, to protect biodiversity, to address the issues of extreme poverty in a world of wealth, and at the core, to understand each other so that we can stop this escalating tension and rhetoric, which is so pervasive in the world right now, so extraordinarily dangerous. The war in Ukraine can be ended at the negotiating table. The differences between the US and China can be resolved at the negotiating table. We don't need great confrontations with each other. We need cooperation, and we need the joy of working together on good, difficult, hard scientific problems. We need IIASA. Happy birthday, IIASA. Thank you very much.